Okay, great. So welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm so delighted to be able to be up here and moderate this fabulous panel of teachers that we have for you. At the end, we're going to have time for questions, and we'd like to have our scholars and pre-service teachers have a chance to ask questions first. So please be mindful of that. And we're going to go ahead and get started with our introductions of our panelists. They're going to tell you their name, the Noyce program that they're from, the area that they teach and their subject, and then they're going to give you one word that describes their 2018-2019 teaching experience.
All right. My name is Jamie McDonald. I went to Bridgewater State University. I teach at Hayden McFadden Elementary School, and I teach grades 2 through 5 STEM. One word to describe my teaching year was overwhelming.
Thank you. Keeden?
My name is Keeden Hopkins. I graduated from East Carolina University. I currently work at Innovation Early College High School, which is located on the campus of East Carolina. And if I had to choose one word, crazy.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maisa Abu-Mallouh. I am from Lewis University in Illinois, go Flyers. And I currently teach at Joliet Central High School in Joliet, go Steelman. And then if I had to pick one word, I'd say it was a year of firsts for me, because it was my first year teaching and everything was brand new.
Hello everybody, my name is Brandon Begay. I currently teach at Shiprock High School, my alma mater. I recently graduated from Arizona State University with a major in biochemistry, so I'm a little new to this. My background is education, but I did have experience in college tutoring, mentoring my peers. One word to describe this year was it was intense. It was a lot of learning.
Hi, my name is Maria Crouse, and I was a Noyce scholar at Metropolitan State University in Denver. I currently teach in Denver Public Schools at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Early College, and I teach high school math. My word to describe my first year teaching is validating.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Isozaki. I was a Noyce scholar at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. I teach math at Hawthorne High School. And I have words to describe. Much better than the first year.
Great. Thank you guys so much. Okay. I'm going to remind you which questions you have as we go through this. So this question is for Maisa and Keeden, okay? And we're going to have 2 minutes each for you to answer this question. What was the most significant thing you learned in the Noyce program along your pathway to becoming a professional STEM educator? Keeden, go ahead.
So you want me to? Okay. Gosh, one of the biggest things for me starting out, I was in a rather unique situation because I graduated, I got hired, and it was also a brand new school, and I was the only science teacher. So biology, chemistry, physics, earth science, it was all me. And it was terrifying, but one of the most significant things my Noyce cohorts helped me with was knowing that I was not alone. Being there by myself teaching the science classes, it could be absolutely nerve-wracking trying to figure out what the next thing is to do, what's going on, and everybody feels that way because it's a brand new school. But talking with them, I was able to get help with lesson plans, with resources, and even if they couldn't directly help, they knew someone that could point me in the right direction. And on top of that, just speaking with the other Noyce scholars in my program, it was just a lot of stress relief. It gave us all like a chance to vent and just kind of, okay, it's not just me. This is all insane, right? But yeah,
Great.
So it helped a whole lot.
Thank you.
For me, it was, I learned a lot about myself throughout the Noyce program. I learned that I have great perseverance, I'm resilient, and I'm passionate. You know, I learned that this is what I was supposed to do and this is what I was meant to do. Because specifically with my summer internship that Noyce requires, I was at the Aurora Regional Fire Museum, and with that, one, I've never worked at a museum before, and two, I knew nothing about firefighting. No, that's not me. And so I had to research information on it and create my own exhibit. Who can say they have their own exhibit at a museum? I can, which is really cool. But so I was able to make my own exhibit, and I had community outreach, and it was something like you had to be quick on your feet, and that's something that I was able to learn. Like I'm good at this, and this is where I'm supposed to be. So, yeah.
All right, thank you. Our next question is for everybody, and we're going to start with Jamie and just work our way to Jonathan. What was the most useful piece of advice you received as you started in your own classroom?
So the teacher that I student taught with, I had known him a couple years before, and I volunteered in his classroom. And I'll never forget the first thing he said to me when I walked in the room. He was like, "So you want to be a teacher?" And I was like, "Yes." And he goes, "Don't ever eat in the lunchroom." And I was like, "What? Where am I supposed to eat?" And he goes, "Find somebody positive, find another group of teachers that brings inspiration to you and eat lunch with them, because the lunchroom can quickly become a place that brings a negative vibe with a lot of teachers venting or, talking about students and things like that." And since then, I've never eaten in the lunchroom, and I've just kind of latched onto teachers that I thought could kind of guide me and help me. And it was a good piece of advice.
Thank you. Keeden.
One of my professors at East Carolina told me that just because you're the teacher doesn't mean that you won't learn the most. And I didn't understand it at the time, but what they meant by that was that even though you're the one in charge of making sure the students understand the information, you also have a responsibility to figure out the best way that they can learn and how to deliver it. And so I always thought that was really good advice.
That is excellent.
For me, my mentor from Lewis University actually told me, he was just like, just be you, and know that within the first 30 seconds of somebody meeting you, you are going to be breaking stereotypes. And that's something that resonates with me because that's my goal. A lot of people they just have misconceptions about me when they first see me. And so my first goal is to make sure that everybody knows that I am a force to be reckoned with, and I'm not a submissive person that people like to think I am.
All right. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, Brandon, that might be hard to follow, but go ahead.
The biggest advice given to me from my fellow coworkers was, they knew that my background was in education, and they told me, it's going to be a struggle. Don't be afraid to change and reflect on your practices. For me, I'm taking classes at San Juan College right now from Alternative Licensure Program, and one of the instructors there, really talked about the power of reflection and change in the classroom. So this first year, I changed up my teaching practices several times, just because they gave me a book and a curriculum. I didn't have to strictly follow everything on each lesson. I can change it up. I can use my best professional judgment and, focus on certain topics. So I think that was one of the biggest things that I took away from this year was, change and reflection, really powerful tools.
Thank you.
Okay, so my best piece of advice really irritated me when I heard it because it just doesn't make sense, but now it does. It is, you have to slow down to go fast. And I did not understand that until I started as a first-year teacher and just felt overwhelmed with everything that I needed to accomplish, especially at the beginning of the year. But you have to slow down. You have to set those norms, the expectations in your classroom, if you want to have an organized, structured classroom to move forward and get them to learn everything that you need them to learn. So yes, you have to slow down to go fast.
I have like two pieces of advice that are like a tie, so I couldn't pick one. So the first one, it was alluded to earlier in one of the plenaries, and it's talking about find that support system. And someone said, find where you're going to be the most supported. And that was a great piece of advice because when I was picking schools, I picked a school that they did offer support to a teacher. And that was very important during my first year. And then another thing, have a classroom management plan. Because without it, you can't teach. So make sure you have at least a working plan ready to go, at least thought out.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. And I want to take a second and add the best advice I ever got. Okay, and that's don't be the worst part of a kid's day. So keep that in mind in every decision you make. Next question is going to be for Brandon, Jonathan, and I believe Maria? Okay. What is the most impactful challenge the student population you work with faces, and how does your personal experience and teacher training help you to positively address that challenge? And let's start with Brandon.
Okay. Hello, everybody. So I currently teach on the Navajo Reservation, which is the largest federally recognized tribe in the United States, as a high population, low need, high poverty. So this first year, a lot of the challenges that I saw my students facing were, alcohol, drug addiction. A lot of them come from single-parent households or even coming from grandparents and uncles, and they deal with a lot of struggles. And, I grew up in the community. I had firsthand accounts of everything that they deal with. And so when I see students, bringing this stuff into the classroom, I kind of tell them, like, all right, I know what you're going through. Came from the same background as you. And, what we can do is we can talk about these and, find correct strategies to overcome these barriers and obstacles. But, a lot of these kids on the Indian reservations, they deal with high poverty, drug addiction, because there's nothing to do on these reservations. So, just a quick little background about the Navajo Nation. It's larger than 10 different states sorry, let me rephrase that. So the Navajo Nation is larger than 10 states in the United States, and in that whole area, we have less than 10 grocery stores and, hardly any businesses on there. There's nothing to do. So what do students resort? Whatever they can get their hands on, and the easiest access is drugs, alcohol, and abuse. And we deal with all those types. And especially this past year, we had a couple of suicides in the school. It hit me hard. A couple of my students took their lives, and, we struggle. And I'm just there to help guide and mentor them and show them the power of education and what you can do to get yourself out of those struggles and overcome those barriers. So, I try to, relate my experiences and show them that there is hope, there is light at the end, and, to achieve and overcome these, stick to the books, stick to your education, and, you'll reach it.
Thank you. Okay, same question to Jonathan.
Okay, so a couple things. I think they go hand in hand. So one is we have, obviously a lot of students I deal with, they have unstable home lives. So that could be, they might not have a meal coming in to your room, or sometimes something is going on personally with their families. And so they struggle with that. And so it carries into the classroom. And so one of the things you always have to be concerned with is they have this negative energy because, understandably so, they're dealing with some very difficult situations. Another thing is they come in with very low preparation. Like, a lot of my students are like 4 or 5 grade levels below, and you can't assume things even like fractions. And so one of the things from my personal experience to manage some of this is I learned to, I went to a Montessori school. And so they emphasize mastery-based learning and incremental steps in presenting the material. And that really helps the students to retain it and to be able to elevate themselves. And then from my preparation program, to make the subject less intimidating for them, because they come in with this phobia, this fear of math. And so you're trying to, instead of giving them a big 50-problem worksheet, maybe you do a domino game to practice, things like that. And then let them know too, that was one of the things that when I was in college, my professors provided a lot of support for us. Like their offices were surrounding where the students studied. And so I try to provide that same support for my students, because whether it's math or whether it's they need someone to talk to, because sometimes you're the only one they feel comfortable to talk to. And so you want to be able to provide that level of support so that way they could come in, they know that you care about them.
Thank you. Maria.
Okay, so I had a little bit of insight leading into what I knew was going to be my greatest challenge as I started working. I work at the school that my children attend, and I was kind of nervous about teaching there because every year my kids were losing their teachers. The attrition is so bad. It was a full semester without a science teacher, and then actually the year I was completing my student teaching, both of my kids lost their math teacher early on in the year, and then long-term subs passed the baton to the end of the year to where both of them ended up having anywhere from 3 to 5 different people in front of that classroom, long-term subs. They ended the year with people who weren't even qualified to be in that role. So I went in there knowing that there were going to be some learning gaps, for one. And another, my youngest son, he got to the point to where he was coming home and saying, "We made another one quit, Mom." And I'm like, well, are you really making them quit? What's going on? It's not us. It must be the other classes. I don't know why they're quitting. But they start to, I don't know, they blame themselves for this. So I went in there, I wanted to make sure that the kids knew it wasn't their fault that people were leaving. I wasn't sure what the reason was, but my first goal was to make sure that the kids knew it wasn't their fault. And actually I went in there my first year, it was all about making it a warm, safe environment. You know, I went in there as a mama bear at first, and I just wanted them to know they were safe, they could make mistakes, and we could laugh about it, and we were going to be just fine. Setting those norms, you know, slowing down so that we could move fast. I wanted to make sure that they knew that this was a place that they could trust. I love growth mindset, everything. I have quotes on my wall. I just tried to give them a nice positive vibe to work with. That's how I was able to address this.
All right, thank you. This question is for Jamie and Maisa and I think Keeden. Are you going to be surprised by this? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, to what extent are you an innovator in your school?
All right, so I was lucky enough this year to have the flexibility to run an after-school STEM club. And it kind of started with my, each month I would name my tables after scientists, and one year I focused on one month I focused on female scientists. And that brought up a conversation about the difference between men and women in STEM fields and how big that gap is. And I found this interest between my 4th and 5th graders that girls, they were like, what? We can't believe that. So I started this STEM club. And my focus was to put the focus on careers in STEM, because these kids come from homes that they really don't have the knowledge of what's out there. So I teamed up with the University of Massachusetts, and I was able to have professors, doctorate students, and master's students all in STEM fields come in and they would talk about their career and then do an activity with the girls. And it didn't cost me any money, and the girls got so much exposure to things that they didn't even know was out there. So they did things like, learned about bones in the body and took core samples from layered cupcakes, and did stuff with really, really fun mathematical problems, along with chemistry and growing crystals and all that fun stuff. And by the time they were done, they always had things that they were able to take home, and I had done a survey in the beginning of the program and at the end of the program, and the girls' interest in STEM and their knowledge of STEM careers and their goals going forward of what they wanted to be when they grow up all changed, from I want to be a professional cheerleader to I want to be a chemist. So it was really great to see, or to just expose the girls to something that they otherwise might not have known about. And we had so much fun doing it. So I feel proud that those girls got that STEM club.
Thank you.
You're
Keeden?
welcome.
Yeah.
One piece of advice that I got when going into teaching was to use what you know, use what you have. Teaching was not my first career. I did a whole lot of different STEM jobs before teaching, and one of the things that I was able to do is incorporate a lot of that into my teaching. So if I was teaching something anatomy related or something about the human body, okay, I got a med school story to tell you. If I was teaching something in chemistry, okay, I have a pharmaceutical story to tell you from when I did that. If I was teaching something in earth science, okay, well, I spent a little time at a water treatment plant. I have something to tell you. And so it got to the point in my classroom where students would look forward to it, not because necessarily of the information, but it was like, oh man, Hopkins is about to tell us a good story. Can't wait. And so it was one of those things that really helped me hook the students, being able to bring what I know and what I've done and past experiences and crazy stories into the classroom.
Great, thank you.
So in my classroom, I make sure that my students are educated on several different things. Similar to Jamie, I bring in guest speakers to my class because I'm conducting research with a colleague on how to improve minority student intent into the STEM pipeline. And so what I do is I highlight a career every month, and depending on like if it's American Awareness, Heart Health Awareness Month or something, like I'll highlight a career, and I usually want to highlight a career that's a field that nobody knows, so like an actuary or anything like a computer science engineer or what do you call it, cybersecurity analyst. So careers that my students have never heard of, and maybe many of you have never heard of. And so I want to make sure that when I invite these guest speakers in, they are from the community, they are minorities as well, so that my students can look at that person who is speaking to them and saying, hey, maybe I can actually fit that position, you know? And I make sure to give them research and provide them with tools that they can see what their future could look like if they wanted to, say, just get a certificate or maybe go into a 4-year program. And I give them the information on how much it would be. I also give them information on Hispanic serving institutions that have that program, as well as historically black colleges or universities. And then I also make sure that I'm presenting this information not just for my students, but also to like our Black Student Union, which I am one of the sponsors for, as well as the Club Puentes, which is our Latinx club. So I make sure that all of my students, and not just my own students, but the school, they're educated on the opportunities that are out there for them. And specifically, it is tiered to STEM because our minorities aren't really excelling there just yet. So we're gonna make sure that we change the world.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so this one's gonna go to everybody, and I think you all know which one this one is. So describe a moment that you wondered, what have I gotten myself into? and a balancing positive experience that made you realize why what you do makes a difference.
All right. So I knew this question was coming, and I couldn't, I was like, I know exactly that moment. So my school year started off so rocky. I was writing 4 curriculums, teaching 17 classes. I had 450 students. My 5th graders were destroying materials. They didn't take anything seriously. The stakes were higher for them because they had their state test at the end of the year. And I remember it was Columbus Day weekend, and my family is always together that weekend. And Sunday, this wave of anxiety came over to me, and I couldn't get into the fun. I couldn't enjoy myself, and I was just so miserable. And my boyfriend kind of pulled me aside. He's like, "What's going on? What can I do?" And I just broke down in sobbing tears. Like, how can I do this? I can't finish the school year. I just, my kids, I couldn't get my classroom management under control, and it had only been 2 months. But I did it. I was fine. And as the school year went on, everything started to level out and even out, and we started to make little progress each one of my 17 classes. Not all of them were perfect, but one of the moments that I really felt proud was my 2nd graders. They're so little, and they don't really know anything. They don't have any background knowledge. And we finally got to the point where they took their mid-year assessment, and I saw so much growth in these kids. And they were challenging because they cry out of nowhere, and they glue things to each other, and they they have undeveloped emotions, and it can sometimes be chaotic in the classroom, but they were learning so much throughout the school year. And for them, we got into this routine where it didn't feel like they were coming to a class where they were learning. They were just having fun, but learning on top of that. So the school year started to progress, and by the end of the year, all my students had shown growth in their assessments, and I was like, phew, I did something right, and my kids are learning, and that's all I wanted for them.
Oh, thank you. Okay, this question might have been harder than I thought it was going to be. Okay, Keeden.
I probably felt that way every day I worked on EdTPA.
Yeah.
Just about every day. Just about every single day of that. But gosh, there were so many times I felt like, I'm like, what am I doing? What am I getting into? Why did I change careers? And one of the issues that I had was bringing the language down a few levels so that students could understand it, because I was so used to the heavy vocabulary and the scientific language. You walk in using 20-letter words with students, that you're just going to get a lot of blank stares and a lot of cricket noises. And so one of the hard tasks that I had, that I struggled so much with, is how am I going to get the information to the students so that they understand it, so that they get it, and then slowly build them up to the level where, hey, now they're using the big words. Now they're using the big vocabulary that they're going to see. And I remember my earth science class, I was like, okay, plate tectonics, how am I doing this? How am I doing this? And I thought it was corny, but I was like, all right, I got in front of the class, I said, all right, divergent, convergent, transform. They all laughed. They're like, what is he doing? Why is he clapping? It's 8 o'clock in the morning. This is weird, this guy's crazy. Well, I felt crazy too. I was like, I don't know, I thought that would work. Cut to months later, they're taking their final. I'm proctoring the exam, I'm walking around, and one by one, I see them at their computer and they're staring at their screen. And all of a sudden, and I thought it was the funniest thing in the world, because I'm like, aha. Aha. And it was I think I saw almost every single student at one point. It was like, yeah, it looked like they were rolling a Play-Doh snake. But yeah, that was really like when it hit, I was like, all right, this is good.
Awesome. Thank you.
So for me, in case you all didn't know, I'm Muslim. I know, surprise. But I work at a school where there are only 2 Palestinian students and the rest are African American, Black, or Latinx, from the Latinx community. And then a small minority of white students, I believe. Now, I knew going into that school I was going to experience a few things that I may not want to experience. For example, one of my students came to me and told me that another student said something racist about me, and so I knew that I was going to be dealing with some racist comments, just being Muslim, and being the only one that the students that have actually gotten the chance to see close up and get to talk to if they wanted to. And so I knew that I was going to get that, and that was kind of the tough part for me because I could have chosen to go to a school where there was a higher Muslim population. However, I knew that the place that I would make the most difference is a place where they can get a Muslim to talk to. And so from that experience where I broke down, of course, when my student told me that, because it was just a random person in the school that didn't know me and said that racist comment. And so what I did was I took that and I said, okay, obviously this is one student, but it's not the only student that thinks this. And in order for me to make this situation better, what I need to do is I need to publicize this, And so I would make sure that whenever I had free time in my class, I'd do a Q&A session. Anytime they had questions on being a Muslim, being an Arab, being a Palestinian, any of those things, I would, I'd be like, okay, there's a time and a place for it, let's do it now. So I would do Q&A sessions with them, and then also anytime we had cultural fairs, I'd make sure to showcase my culture so that they have that experience and seeing, oh my gosh, you're not that different. You're normal too. And so, and I get thank you letters that say, I didn't know you were so normal. I'm like, oh, thank you. I'm really not normal, but okay, whatever you say. And then also, what was really nice is that I started a segment at my school with we have the news. They record the news, student news. And I created a segment on there called Ask a Muslim, and so I have this Google Forms where students just ask a question. It's anonymous, and we just kind of sift through it, pick a question, and then that's just what I talk about that day on there, and everyone plays it for their advisories. And what was really cool, the really awesome moment was I was walking down the hallway one time, and it was during Ramadan, and my students don't know what Ramadan is. So I had to tell them it's when you don't eat or drink from sunrise to sunset, which scares people. And as I was walking down the hallway, this random kid is talking to his other friend, and he's like, "Hey, that teacher was on our news today, and she said that she's not eating or drinking from sunrise to sunset. That's crazy." And I was like, "Oh my God, people are listening." So it was just I just knew that I picked the right place to be.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, Brandon.
For me, I think my biggest obstacle that I faced was making a transition with a background in biochemistry that got me prepared to work in a science lab, creating medicine, and flipping that, going into a classroom where I'm gonna have to teach and instruct 30 individuals. So that was a challenge that I was gonna have to face. I knew I was gonna have to go back to school, take more classes, but that was the reason why I didn't choose pharmacy, because I didn't want to go back to school for another 4 or 5 years and get that, and yet I went into teaching, now I have to go back and learn some more on how to teach. So I knew that my first year was gonna be a struggle because I didn't have any background knowledge. I was gonna have to learn quickly. My instructor, I do journals and I would submit it to her, and she's like, "Wow, you really learn by," I think she called it baptism by fire, trial and error, learning the hard way. So that's something that, I knew kind of how I was. I kind of learned from my mistakes, and when I learn from my mistakes, I grow strong from it, I learn from it, and I improve on it. Not only that I had to take additional classes after school, but I started taking on additional roles in the school building. So about a month or two into school, my principal came into my classroom and said, how would you like to help out with after-school tutoring? I was like, hey, I'll definitely help out with that. I like tutoring. I want to help every student succeed. And so 2 days out of the week, I would go to after-school tutoring from 3:30 to 5:30 on top of my additional classes and readings that I had to do. And after my first semester, my principal came up to me again and he said, how would you like to pilot an ACT prep class? And I was like, all right, I'll take it. Keep coming with me with all these opportunities, because I'm the type of person is you put opportunity in front of it, I'll take it and I'll go with it. I like to learn and improve my style. So, my first year was a juggling act with, learning how to teach and become an instructor, being an after-school tutoring instructor, as well as, being an ACT prep. So every single day out of the week, I would be at my high school until about 6 o'clock every evening, doing some sort of, tutoring or prep. And I really like doing that because my overall goal is to empower my people on my reservation with the power of knowledge in math and science. And so I felt that the only way that I can do that was definitely teach, but also to reinforce their understanding was to offer myself available to them as much as I can. So to me, that was staying after school, offer them tips and strategies on test taking. And what really drove me on that was one thing that limits my people from attending colleges or universities is funding. And funding some of the scholarships that the Navajo Nation offers is through ACT, and they look at your ACT scores. And historically at Shiprock High School, nobody has really scored above 21. We're below average, and when they get these scores, they look at it, they put themselves down. They're like, oh, I can't succeed in college. I only scored a 13. What am I going to do? And so that was an opportunity for me to step in there and say, like, hey, these are some strategies that you can use to improve your score and help you get some, funds for school, because that's what holds a lot of my people back, is just funding and really that determination and motivation to continue their school after high school. So it was a tough year, and I made it. And so I continue to have that mentality, just keep learning and growing. Keep, whatever opportunity that comes your way, take it, because it's a learning experience, and that's all I'm about, learning and improving myself.
Thank you, Brandon. Okay, Maria.
Okay, my what did I get myself into moment was towards the beginning of the year. In the beginning of the school year, there's like such a happy little buzz. Everybody's just in such a positive, happy mood. Well, we were in an especially happy mood, like going into Labor Day weekend. So I had made it to Labor Day weekend. It was the Friday before, super excited. It's right after lunch, my very last class period of the day. I'm walking over to close the door, the bell's about to ring, bell rings, and I have 4 students involved in a fight in my classroom, and it was just out of nowhere, just erupted. I think it was planned, but I was not in that plan. So that made me panic. I still had to conduct a class somehow and compose myself. But that was the one moment where I was like, oh, we didn't, take a class. There wasn't a class on what to do when this happened. So that was my moment. But my positive experience that really balances out, I had to wait, of course, till the end of the year. Halfway through the school year, I had a couple of seniors join my integrated math 3 class because they hadn't gotten the credits earned the year before. And they were especially challenging. They were the ones who come in and they don't like math. They're not math people. They struggled last year. They don't know how they're supposed to pass it this year. But one in particular, he started out strong and then he stopped coming to class. I would see him in the hallways, ask him if he's going to be in class. He would say yes, and he wouldn't be. Towards the end of the year, it looked like he was settling for an F. And then I saw him on social media. He was going to all these senior things with his friends because they were all graduating, and seeing them get new laptops and all this other stuff, but he wasn't going to graduate without this credit. So during my off period, I actually went and tracked him down. I found him, and I told him, you're going to come and sit down with me. We're going to prioritize this. You don't have to make up everything you've missed. You and I are going to work out a plan to where you're going to prioritize it, and we're going to do the big things. And long story short, he stuck to it. I've never seen anybody put that much effort in. But he stuck to it. He completed all of the missing assessments. He finished my class with a C. And I remember whenever he was walking out, he looked like he was about to cry. And he told me that the only reason he was graduating was because I didn't give up on him when he had already even given up on himself. So, those are his notes.
Okay, Jonathan.
Well, that's a tall order to live up to. Like, I didn't doubt that what I got myself into. Like, I want to teach, but I gotta admit, it was much harder than I expected. Like, classroom management, I had like the freshman batch, and they were what you call interventions. So these are students who are underperforming relative to the other students. So they already come with this. Not only do they have a lot of energy, they have all this anxiety and negative feeling towards math, so they're going to act out more negatively. And so sometimes they'll hurl some very, sometimes very hurtful things towards your way. And I took that too personally. But I had colleagues to have a positive mindset. My parents, my family helped me to have the right perspective to see the positive. And one of my professors also said, hey, celebrate the victories. Celebrate, and my father even told me, smell the roses on the side, because there's a lot of mud going through the teaching path. There are going to be negative instances, but appreciate those positive moments. Like, I had a similar story with one of my students that first semester. One of the things is she told me, hey, I've been messing up. Is there anything I could do to raise my grade? And I said, yes. And I told them, when they came after school, I said, I'm glad you're here. And so they told me that I was like one of the only teachers that allowed them to make up some of those assignments to raise up their grade. And that meant a lot to them. And then second semester, I had a group of students. They would just come in, eat lunch, talk to me. And that was a very positive experience, because it's like, as chaotic as the class was, they viewed me as someone safe to talk to. And so that was very positive. And then I tried different activities, experimented a little bit with some of the resources we had. And I started to get these little successes. And so that helped me to still maintain a positive approach towards that year.
Great, thank you. Okay, these last few questions we're going to have to go really fast on because we're getting close. You guys see that time down there? And we want to leave plenty of room for questions from the audience. So this is going to have to be really quick on this one. And I think we have Jamie, Brandon, and Jonathan. You expect this one? Okay, a teacher prep program cannot realistically prepare you for every challenge you will face in a high-need classroom. Knowing what you know now, if you could design one class every teacher must take, what is the topic this course would include? One topic.
For me, I think that an important topic, which whether you work in a high-need school or not, I think trauma-sensitive training is super important. Understanding how trauma affects the brain and the behaviors and some of the things that these kids have gone through, especially at the young ages that I teach, it's a wonder how some of them aren't in worse shape. So understanding how trauma can affect these students is super important to all teachers.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, next, Brandon.
Okay. One thing that definitely, if you teach on or near American Indian Reservation, is to definitely take a class at a local community college or university about the people and the history and the culture, because during my time in high school, as well as this year of teaching, I've seen teachers who knew nothing about American Indians. You know, they still thought we lived in teepees and hogans. You know, and this is almost 2020. You know, that was like 300, 400 years ago. And so I think teachers really need to get a history lesson on their student population and know their student. And, you know, I think that would definitely help out a lot.
That's awesome. Thank you. Jonathan?
Classroom management.
We can't ever get enough.
Classroom management, because it's true, like without it, you know, you can't even teach your subject. And I had that happen to in my first year, where it was very disorderly, and I struggled with it. So just some basic guidelines. Obviously, it won't cover all cases, and I don't expect it to, but just some simple guidelines, a little bit more direct. And I'm encouraged to hear, like throughout the conference, that there are some of these teacher preparation programs that are starting to address it more directly. And so that's an encouraging sign, but I'll definitely like to see more of that.
Awesome, great. Those are 3 great things. Is everybody listening? Did you hear? Okay, so here we have.
I'm going to have a coughing fit.
Yes,
I'm gonna step
yes.
out over there real quick.
Yes.
I'll be right back. We're good.
Okay, so this last question is for Maria and Keeden. Based on your experience in the classroom, why do you think teachers, especially STEM teachers in high-need districts, leave the teaching profession, and what do you think it would take for them to persist? And let's try to do that in 30 seconds or less, if you can. Keeden.
Money.
Money? Okay. Money.
No, well, money and support.
Support.
Because, I mean, every job you see that people have when they get there, they have the equipment to do it, whether you're an engineer, whether you're a biologist, whether you're a chemist. When you get there, you have the equipment necessary to do it. And in order to successfully do your job, I think teachers need the support to be able to accomplish that.
Awesome, that's great. So that's not just money for the teachers, but money for the process. Great. Okay, Maria.
I think it comes down to respect, because for all of you, even pre-service teachers, to become a teacher is a pretty extensive process. And we come out, we have to be content knowledge experts, and you go into the schools and you know what you had to achieve to be a teacher in that class. But then you're never asked, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about this policy? And you're getting all this information. This is how you improve. This is how you get better. And it doesn't seem like they're really going to stop and take the time to listen to the person who has maybe the most relevant recent information on you know, engagement strategies and that sort of thing. So I think like it comes down to feeling respected. I think one way to counteract that is like we need to remember why we got into this in the first place, right? So part of it is making our own little trophy wall, or when kids write you those notes that tell you how much of a difference you made for them, stick it on a wall so that you have a place that you can go and you can reward yourself, because there's not a whole lot of people giving attaboys at the schools. So find a way where you can intrinsically motivate yourself even.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, we're going to open it up for some questions. We have time for a couple of questions, so go ahead and come on up to the mics. Are you okay?
I'm good.
Okay.
Just standing.
So do we have a question? Okay, I think we've got somebody.
This question is addressed to Jamie. My name is Deirdre Riley, and I'm a science cluster teacher in Staten Island. I'm a Noyce Master Fellows, and my question, like your struggle, is to get to know all your children, since you see so many. And what strategies do you use?
So a big part of my strategy was I would spend, well, at my school they have full breakfast and full lunch. So the grades that didn't have lunch at the same time with me, I would have those tough students for breakfast and then other students for lunch. And I just worked really hard to get to know all their names. And it's tough because when you have 450 students, you can't build relationships with all of them. And when you're in a high need school, that's one of the most important things you can do to be successful with your students or to reach all of your students. So pulling the ones that needed, that I would pick out the students that I thought I needed to build a really strong relationship with the most and have them for breakfast and lunch bunches and like things like that.
That sounds like a good strategy.
It helped.
I should try it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next.
Yeah. Hi. My name is Anthony. I'm from USC. This question is for Keeden. Is that how you pronounce your name? Yeah. I was wondering, so earlier you talked a bit about having trouble connecting content with students without using such words. And I'm wondering if you can elaborate a little bit more on how you kind of manage that, because I have a similar problem with my students, and I don't want to like discount their education by removing such powerful words, and I also don't want to spend 45 minutes a day talking about vocabulary, which is very important. I just don't have enough time for it. So I'm wondering what your strategies were for kind of getting the content to them without discounting their education at all.
Well, one of the things that I tried to do was break the words down. So I actually spent a good portion of the beginning of the school year talking about prefixes and suffixes and getting them to the point where I'm like, okay, if you see this, what does it mean? And another thing I would try and do is front load the vocabulary. So after they would take a test on one unit, maybe go ahead and give them the words for the next unit up front. That way when I taught it, it wasn't the first time they were seeing or hearing it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Because I still have some more we can go over here. Okay, well, if somebody else comes up, that'll be fine, but I have another question. Do we have somebody? Oh, okay.
Hello, my name is Rigel from Florida International University. My question is to everyone. So I'm a student right now, physics, and one of my main problems is how to incorporate social justice topics into the science and math classes, because those classes are pretty objective. So my question is, what are your strategies to implement the social phenomena based on social justice? If you have any strategies for that.
I found an online PDF, actually. It was social justice and mathematics, and there are little activities that we were able to do in my math class, in my financial algebra class with the seniors. And they were looking at some research. It was looking at the practices in New York City when it came to stop and frisk, and showing how the percentages of people, they were out of proportion, basically. They were stopping and frisking more minorities than there were living there. And they said that it should have been equal. If you have 20% white, you should be getting 20% stop and frisk, because you can stop and frisk anybody. But we did an activity on that, and they started to look at the numbers. They had to graph it several different ways and make some inferences, and we talked about quantitative and qualitative reasoning. So it became a very, very rich conversation regarding social justice, as well as getting all of that math in. It was very cool. But there are resources out there. I was excited to trip upon that. I think we'll do a few more things from there next year.
Does anybody else have something along those lines? Jonathan, go ahead.
One of the things you could do is think of a common example or something, or a common thing that they experience. So, especially in Los Angeles, driving is one of those things that students experience. Or maybe even the airport, or pick a favorite sports team they have. Like for Los Angeles, it's the Dodgers. And so you could incorporate that even in the types of problems you're doing. Maybe you bring in their favorite food. You talk about, I primarily work in a Hispanic Latino area, and so I bring in but in the examples I talk about tamales or pizza or something that's very familiar. So that's another way you could make the context like more real, more familiar to them. And that's a very simple way. You could just look around the neighborhood or ask them those type of questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this question is going to be, if you could fast forward 20 years and the students you have this year were talking to their children, how would they remember you? And this one goes for everybody, and we're going to start with Jonathan.
I would say passionate and caring. And with that passion, you put in a lot of your effort to make the best possible lessons and to engage them as best as you could. Like, I view this teaching profession as a mission. This is not just a day job where you take a paycheck. You go out there and you do your very best and you show the students that I care about you. And so that is reflective in even the handouts you give them. The time you spend after school. Another thing I do too is I go after school and sometimes I do the scoreboard for the football, basketball games. And so I show them that I care more about you as a person. And so that passion to help these students thrive and succeed, I think it's pretty evident in what I do.
Thank you.
I think 20 years from now, some of the kids might be confused as to how many children I really have, because there are a lot of kids at the school that call me Mama Maria even. So I only have 2 there, but there are lots of kids who would call me Mom by the end of the year. So a few of them call me the real one. But I think all of them should be able to say that I cared for and loved them all like they were my own family.
Great. I'm so sorry.
So I strive to be like my high school teacher that I really looked up to and that really got me prepared for college. So what I remember about him was that he was very rigorous, he was very engaging, and he was very passionate about teaching the subject that he taught. And so that's something that I strive to be. I want students to remember me as that math teacher in high school who was, not only was he hard, but he got me prepared for the challenges and struggles that I will have to endure in college. So I just hope that they remember me as the one that got them prepared and ready for college.
Awesome.
So unlike you guys, who are going to remember me for having the coughing fit, and I'm so sorry about that, my students are going to remember the fact that I was fun and I was easy to talk to, easygoing, and then also that I taught them more than just physics and biology, but I also taught them about possible careers and hopefully aided their future, and then also taught them about humans and humanity.
Great, thank you. Keeden?
I would hope they would remember me as being not just a science teacher, but a life teacher. Someone that not only told them that, hey, honeybees are dying, but why is it so important that they don't? In addition to that, teaching them accountability, teaching them organization, teaching them how to have a mind of their own, how to be able to look online and say, hey, I don't think that article is true, and being able to define themselves.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. And then we'll take a couple more questions before we end it.
I think my students would remember me for being passionate about science and making it a really fun topic for them, because they didn't have any background in it before, and we always did these really fun hands-on activities, so I really feel like they would remember that, and just being a fair and understanding teacher, trying to do that, or give students a chance. It's also likely that they would remember me for dedicating my burps to them after drinking seltzer all afternoon. It was a privilege to get a burp dedicated after you, because that means you were making good choices. And I always said, excuse me.
Okay.
But they'll definitely remember that.
Okay. All right, thanks. We have a question?
My name is Marissa Stewart. I'm a Noyce scholar at Vanderbilt University in Nashville. And this question is for Jonathan. You mentioned math phobia, and I believe math phobia is really real, and a lot of students have it. But what are some of your strategies to help combat that phobia in your classroom?
I alluded to some earlier, like I talked about sometimes you gamify it a little bit. And so instead of, we all learn, we got this big textbook problem set, we have to do kill and drill for like 30 problems, and that intimidates the students. So maybe you do a little Connect 4 activity, or maybe you do a domino game like I referred to earlier. And then also one of the things I do is I give them guided notes. And so sometimes I handwrite, I draw on them, just to give that little personal touch to it. It like humanizes the process a little bit. So those are some things. And then I try to incorporate some technology. Maybe it's like Kahoot or something. So a little bit more fun into it. I'm still trying to figure out more strategies, but those are some of the things I've been doing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and this will be the last question.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Erna Brazil. I'm a Noyce scholar from New Jersey City University. I heard the mention of coming into the school, and it was a brand new school. I heard the mention of guided notes and creating those for your students. I'm currently teaching this summer, and I'm tired and overwhelmed with creating lesson plans from scratch. So for those of you who came into a new thing, a new situation where you perhaps didn't have another teacher to hand those things to you, how did you handle that? How did you have time to create everything? And did your social life suffer because of that?
Okay, who wants to take this one? Keeden wants to take this one.
One of the things I had to be honest with myself about up front is that I could not accomplish it all on my own. It was just too much being a first-year teacher, being at a brand new school. And so what I would do is I would try and do a little bit on my own, and then I would also try and just seek out what else I could use from someone else, because I mean, if it works, it works. So it doesn't all have to be something super original that you came up with, as long as it's something that's innovative, as long as it's something that works for the students. And so a lot of times I would seek out other teachers. I would look up stuff on the internet to use because it was easy and it works.
Okay. Well, that ends our 2019 Voices from the Field panel. I just want to give a big round of applause to our teachers there.